Hi, everyone. It's Connie Burton. Thank you so much for listening today. Just had a great conversation with Congressman Crenshaw. We talked about tariffs. We talked about the 2020 presidential elections, particularly Beto. And most importantly, why you're really going to want to listen to this podcast is we got his feelings on the finale of the Game of Thrones. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this. Also, after you've listened to the podcast, I'd sure appreciate it if you would go to the Texan.news. Look at some of our articles that we have up. We have a dedicated, excellent crew that's writing some great content for you. Check us out, read some free articles, and then if you would, please subscribe. You can get us as low as $7.50 a month, and the reason that we're doing it this way is because we are reader supported. We're not relying on ads or anybody else. We're relying on you because we want to give you the best content out there. So check us out, and I really love it if you would subscribe. In the meantime, have a great listen. Thanks. Welcome, everyone. I'm Connie Burton, and today I'm talking with Representative Crenshaw. And I want to give the listeners just a little bit of background on Congressman Crenshaw first. He is a freshman congressman elected in 2018. He represents Texas's 2nd congressional district, which covers an extensive area of Houston's western and northern suburbs. He serves on both the Budget Committee and Homeland Security Committee. Crenshaw grew up in Katy, Texas. He is the son of an oil worker. He graduated high school in Bogota, Colombia, which I find very interesting. He then graduated from Tufts University and holds a Master of Public Administration from Harvard. He's a decorated former Navy SEAL who served 5 tours overseas as a member of the SEAL Team 3 and deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan. He was wounded from an improvised explosive device in Afghanistan in 2012, but still managed to deploy afterwards to both South Korea and Bahrain. He earned 2 Bronze Star medals, the Purple Heart and the Navy Commendation Medal with Valor before retiring as Lieutenant Commander in 2016. Welcome, Congressman Crenshaw. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. I'm glad you're on. I really, really appreciate it. We know that your time is very busy. One of the things I wanted to mention, because you were on Twitter, you did some beautiful tributes to fallen comrades this past Memorial Day. And, one of the things I'd like to ask you is just in a practical sense, what do you think the best way that those others of us can honor those who have sacrificed their lives to our country?
Well, just maybe look up a few different stories that you can actually learn about and remember. The whole point of Memorial Day is to memorialize and remember the sacrifices of others. And I think families and veterans appreciate it if Americans actually do that. Have your barbecues and parades and everything, but also just really take the time to get to know a fallen service member. I think and that's why I put out those stories. There's 8 guys in particular that I knew pretty well and over the years, and I want to share that with everybody.
It was awesome. Well, we appreciate that. We certainly appreciate your service to our country as well. I obviously have to mention the Saturday Night Live skit. There's I think that's how a lot of people came to know you, frankly, other than your run, obviously. But you were on Saturday Night Live with Pete Davidson. Do you by chance still keep in touch with him?
Not really.
Or would you consider doing a Saturday Night Live skit again ever?
Oh yeah, I think it'd be fun. It was a lot of fun doing it.
I think most people, regular people, really appreciated it. I think I remember. I don't really watch Saturday Night Live anymore, and it was fun for me to watch that all play out. And I thought it was. I don't know. I think most people appreciated your response and you being on, and I think people would love to see you on that again. But anyway,
it's
you definitely don't keep in touch with. I'm sorry.
It's a good second career if this one doesn't work out.
Yeah, I've said that many times as well. Not with Saturday Night Live, with other things. Okay, so let's get down to some policy questions. You've been serving in D.C. as congressman now for about 6 months. I don't know if you like to grade Congress, but if you did, what would what grade would you give the performance there?
Well, in the House of Representatives, where I serve, I mean, I give it a failing grade. Of course, but of course, I'm biased. We're in the minority, so the House is passing bills that I think are terrible for this country. There are some bipartisan bills that do get passed. That's unfortunately rare, and it's been pretty clear to us that the Democrats don't want to work with us on some of the more substantive issues like immigration reform or border security, the things that are really pressing, and that continues to be unfortunate. But so reality is I gave it a failing grade, and there's no good reason for them to pass these bills out. They're pure messaging bills because they know full well that the Senate won't take them up. All right, and so if you know that the bill you're passing won't be put into law, then why are you bothering doing it? Why not work with us to make it a bill that both sides like enough to vote for, but it's a compromise so that it would pass the Senate, but they have no interest in doing that.
I think, I'm sure you know this, certainly the American public sees this too, right? That's what I notice for years now, frankly. They see everything that's done there as show votes rather than actually doing the work. And I generally don't like to use the phrase "get something done" because a lot of times that means not good stuff, frankly, right? But it would be nice to, particularly border security, because that is one of the few things that the federal government is supposed to do. And so I know that's a big priority for you. We've just had 2 straight months of over 100,000 apprehensions, according to Customs and Border Protection. I mean, what do you think? I mean, you just said it. They're not really interested. The Democrats are not interested in really doing anything. What is the answer? What is the answer going to be, do you think?
Well, the correct policy answer is asylum reform. Lindsey Graham's bill is a great step in that direction. So that's the most immediate pressing issue is fixing the asylum process, which basically means you stop the loopholes. You stop allowing this situation where people know that if they just jump across the border and say they're claiming asylum and they bring a child with them, it doesn't have to be their child, but just a child. Well, let me rephrase that. It's supposed to be their child, but they tend to bring children that are not theirs. And they claim asylum, and then they get released into the public while their court date, many, many months from now, might take place. I mean, you have to be purposefully naive to believe that our system is not being taken advantage of, that they're not completely taking advantage of this loophole. DHS Secretary testified at our committee a week or two ago. And he said about 10 to 15% of asylum seekers from the Northern Triangle countries actually have a valid claim, according to our own laws. So this should be pretty common sense. You can't help everybody. And this is always what the Democrats say. You point out this problem and they'll say, but the Statue of Liberty. Okay, I got that. But we still need a system in place. You still need standards in place. This is just common sense. And the problem with compromising on this is we don't have the same goal. You can't compromise when you don't have the same goal. Okay, if we want to alleviate poverty, well, we all want to do that. So at least we have the same goal. We might have different ways of getting there. We all want better healthcare, more accessible, cheaper healthcare. All right, there's actually ways to compromise on that. Maybe healthcare is a different issue, but on the immigration issue, they do not want to solve it. This is what I've discovered over the last few months. I didn't always say that, but you watch their rhetoric from before, President Obama talking about the border, Chuck Schumer talking about the border. They used to speak about it very differently. They've completely flip-flopped. Maybe that's just because of Trump, but it's also because they don't really have a set of principles that guides them. And if they believe they can eventually get more votes and rile up their base more by just being against us on this issue, then they'll do that. And that's why that compromise is so far out of our grasp.
That's an excellent point. Just yesterday, Beto O'Rourke was in the Dallas area, and he said there is no crisis at the border.
Yeah, they're still playing that line.
So I
It's crazy.
totally understand what you're saying, that they don't, there is no compromise to make when they're not, when it looks to us, not even looks to us, they're flat out saying
They're
it.
just they pretend to
right?
live in a. I mean, they're living in a fantasy world, and they have no
Yeah.
problem shamelessly lying about that, and that's really unfortunate. I mean, Beto's one of the worst. I mean, he talked about tearing down walls. I mean, that's his solution. He wants to tear them down. So I mean, it's at least he's honest. You know,
Right, exactly. Yeah, he also mentioned when it was brought up about in Colombia. See, I believe that's where it was. Guatemala. Yes, it was Guatemala. He was confronted with all the people that are coming in from Guatemala and said, what is the answer to that? And he said that we need to put more money. The United States needs to spend money in Guatemala so that they don't have the issues that they currently have that force them to come over to our country illegally.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well,
Yeah.
if he has such a big heart, he should let them stay in his guest rooms. I mean, he's got a bunch of guest rooms, and that's the thing. These people always want somebody else to be the moral, to engage in the moral activity, right? They don't want to do it themselves, right? They're not offering up their own home. They're not offering up their own money. They want somebody else to do it. They want Border Patrol to be nicer and to take in hundreds of thousands of people and to somehow figure it out. Right? And they want to complain about the processing centers and how those look. But what they don't want to do is offer another solution. They never say how we can make it better. All right. And why don't you offer something? Do you want us to pay for their hotel rooms? What do you want?
Right.
Should we ask? Maybe we should have volunteers come out and say, hey, you can stay in our guest room, and we should just decide. Say, hey, this family can go stay in that guest room, and they will pay their health care. They will pay everything until their asylum court date comes across. That would be actually putting your money where your mouth is. But they don't do any of that because again, they don't actually want to solve the problem. Now, I will say that Beto is not totally wrong in that we do need to focus on, I think, development, long-term development in those countries. It is our backyard, and I think as a country, we haven't focused enough in foreign policy in the Americas, and I think that's a useful thing to do. So I don't totally disagree with him there, but that's a long-term development strategy. That has nothing to do with the short-term fix.
Or the immigration policy itself. My guess is
that's
from
exactly
your perspective.
Right.
Right. Well, okay. So Texas has the 10th largest economy in the world, and we've had 108 straight months of job creation. Are you concerned with the economic impact of tariffs on Texans and the Texas economy particularly? And interesting enough, I wrote this question the day before yesterday, and then all of a sudden yesterday, President Trump, mentioned that he wanted to impose tariffs on Mexico. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's probably not the right move. I do have a problem with it. On the other hand, I do appreciate the president trying to do something, trying to gain some sort of leverage over Mexico. Mexico does not want this. I think they're willing to work with us, but generally speaking, we really need them to be our partner. They have not indicated to us that they don't want to be our partner. They have increased their deportations. They have allowed asylum cases to be waited out in Mexico as opposed to letting them in here. So that cooperation is happening. It needs to be stronger. My worry about this is, one, it's a tax on Americans. When you put a tariff. When you implement a tariff, it's a tax on us. So, okay, there's that. It diminishes our trade relations. Also, I worry that it's going to torpedo the USMCA. I think we need that to pass. Now, I don't think Mexico is the biggest issue there. I think Democrats are the biggest issue with the USMCA. They keep making up reasons to be against it just because it's the president's plan, but it's a good deal.
Could you tell our listeners the initials there? What
Sorry.
do those stand for?
Let's just call it NAFTA 2. Okay, so this is the new NAFTA deal, USMCA,
Sure.
and the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement. So,
Got it.
yeah, NAFTA 2 is the best way to look at that. It's a good
Sure.
deal. It's better than the last one. Canada's ready to sign off on it. Mexico's ready to sign off on it, but they need us to pass it in Congress. And Democrats keep getting in the way of that. They keep making up reasons to be against it. If you're listening to this and your congressperson is a Democrat, you need to call their office and tell them and ask them, make them explain why they're not supporting this. And it is good for Texas. Texas benefits more from free trade than most states. There is no reason for any Texan to be against this deal. It's why I come out against tariffs, because Texas benefits from more free trade. So, at least I'm consistent. Democrats have no idea what they stand for in Congress. They just know they're against the president, and that's why they're against this. But, it's good to have some intellectual consistency on these things. And generally speaking, free trade is good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So do you see that? I mean, because sometimes I wonder that too. I mean, do you see pretty much there that the reason most Democrats are against whatever policies that y'all are trying to put forth are pretty much targeted against the president? I mean, it's more about that than it is anything else. Is that what you're seeing up there?
Oh, 100%. I mean, again, you could look at recordings of Chuck Schumer talking about immigration and border security and walls and all these things. And then all of a sudden the president wants it and he's against it because they don't have principles. This is the problem when you're dealing with the left. They don't have a set of principles that drives them up in Washington, right? It's just do good stuff. What is good stuff, and who defines it? This is how they think, and they don't go up there with a framework of how to govern. Okay, and conservatives do. All right, we can ask ourselves certain questions like, does this encourage personal responsibility, or does it encourage dependency on government? Is this putting a primacy on local and state control over policies where it is closest to the people voting for it, or is it putting power in a federal bureaucracy? All right, is it giving people more freedom or less freedom? Is this doing good, or does it just feel good? Is it just signaling? All right, are we thinking about the second and third order consequences of these policies? There's a way that conservatives govern that I think is a coherent governing philosophy. I don't know what that is on the left, and this is why you're seeing it. You're seeing them flip flop like this.
Right. So speaking of bureaucratic mess, I should say, I don't think that wasn't your words, actually. What I find very interesting is, the Democrats were in office, they had control, they pushed Obamacare through, and we have Obamacare now. And yet all the Democratic presidential hopefuls are pretty much all talking about some sort of form of socialized medicine. I find that interesting. Are they saying that Obamacare isn't working? Why are we continuing to go if Obamacare was what they wanted, it was the answer to it all, and now they're all going toward a socialized medicine? I mean, what is your response to that?
So, well, that's the correct analysis. It is an admission. It is an implicit admission that Obamacare does not work. We all know it doesn't work. Premiums have skyrocketed. There's less choice in the marketplace. It's a disaster. It's always been a disaster. Nobody denies that. It's like we had a great system before, but Obamacare did make it worse. Anytime you try to regulate a very complex market like a healthcare market or industry with a bunch of bureaucrats, it's going to be impossible. Bureaucrats are not omniscient. And there's this belief on the left that bureaucrats in Washington can know everything, that they can tinker with society in just the right way and figure out just the right way to solve this. In real life, it doesn't work that way. So we need to be moving towards free market reforms. And I think Republicans have some good ideas, but it is an implicit admission that it doesn't work. And it's also a better indicator of why I think sort of the moderate liberalism which created Obamacare always leads to totalitarianism. It always does, because if you're promising people more things and more control and better stuff, right? Always have to promise them better stuff because you got to run on a new election, and they don't have a governing philosophy, so they always have to promise more things. And you always got to build upon the last thing you promised, and the healthcare debate is exactly that. So they promised one thing, it didn't work out. They knew it wouldn't work out. I believe that. And there's been some commentary by the strategists who created Obamacare. They knew it wouldn't work. They knew it was a stepping stone towards something more totalitarian in nature. And Medicare for all would be an absolute disaster, because what it does is it's the systemic price controls. Okay, so you have to underpay doctors and hospitals to even come close to meeting the lowest estimates, about $32 trillion that it would cost us. If you wanted to pay for that, you'd have to add about 25 basis points to our payroll tax, which is crazy. But that's the lowest estimate, which is frankly pretty unrealistic. But then even then you're underpaying doctors and hospitals, so they have to constrict supply, and then you have to hire a whole army of bureaucrats to decide how to manage that care and who gets what and what gets approved. All right, we already don't like a third party approving things, but imagine when it's bureaucrats approving, it's going to be much worse. And you're going to crowd out the private market as a result. So even things like Medicare Advantage, which people like because that's a competition based on a lot of different private insurers, you can't even have that anymore because you're going to end up crowding out all of these other private insurers. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy, and they're trying to sell it to people by promising them free stuff, and nothing is free in this world. So
absolutely. And obviously, as is every presidential election, the next one is, equally as important, particularly with, all of these contenders looking to do even more, particularly in that area, I think. But listen, I know that we only have you for a very short period of time. You're a busy man. I just want to end it on a very upbeat kind of strange question. I understand that you watch Game of Thrones. Is that correct?
Yeah, I finished it.
So I wanted to end it on something like that. What did you think? Were you happy with the end? Were you as disappointed as what I saw everybody else was on Twitter?
I think there was a very obvious way to end that, which would have been a lot cooler. Okay, so Jon Snow, he kills Daenerys. All right, and that was an exciting moment. We didn't see that. You kind of saw it coming, but we weren't sure. I think the obvious ending there would have been to have Jon Snow supporters basically battle the Unsullied and then have this big war and hopefully put Jon Snow on the throne. I think that's what we were all cheering for. One last battle along those lines. And then everybody was like, oh, let's just have that kid who really didn't do anything this entire time. Let's just have him be king. I mean, come on. Like, really? That's it? That was your big twist? It wasn't even a twist. And there was no fight put up. Everybody said, oh yeah, that's a great idea. He contributed nothing this whole time.
I'm just cracking up because you sound just like everybody else on Twitter. My daughters, my son-in-law. I'm ashamed to admit this. This is bizarre, but I didn't watch any of them until the very last 2 episodes, which is really weird. I get that, but I basically knew the whole time what was going on because I paid attention, on Twitter, and so man, everybody just did not like that last episode. So you wanted to see Jon Snow be the on the throne.
I
right?
thought that was the obvious choice.
Well, this is going to be the reason people listen to this podcast, Congressman, is because of how heated you got during the answer to that question. So I appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. You taking the time. I really do. The Texan is, we want people to get to know their Congress people, the issues without being hostile to the worldview of Texans. And so, we just kind of want to have a conversation with you, and we just appreciate you taking the time and doing that with us, sir. So thank you. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
If you've been enjoying our podcast, it would be awesome if you would review us on iTunes. And if there's a guest you'd love to hear on our show, give us a shout out on Twitter. Tweet @TheTexanNews. We're so proud to have you standing with us as we seek to provide real journalism in an age of misinformation. We're paid for exclusively by readers like you, so it's important we all do our part to support The Texan by subscribing and telling your friends about us. God bless you, and God bless Texas.